We know today has been probably very long and possibly difficult for many of you, so we really appreciate you guys staying attentive and focused. This final block will be on reconciliation and inspiring hope and resilience. This session will target reconciliation and empowerment within ourselves and our community. We will cover techniques to help reduce anxiety, provide information regarding local resources, and engage in thought provoking journaling questions. This final reflection block will allow us to work towards activating the hope and resilience we all have the power to foster here to make impactful, lasting change. I remain convinced that most human conflicts can be solved through genuine dialogue conducted with a spirit of openness and reconciliation. Dalai Lama. Conversations surrounding systemic oppression and interpersonal issues may bring up many feelings for people, some that are expected and some that are not. For many of us, this may have been the first time that we have been asked to reflect on our place within society and how our identities fit into the world in complex ways. It's difficult to understand the way we may be treated and the advantage we may or may not receive because of things we cannot change, such as our gender identity, sexuality, and race. For non misogyny affected people, conversations regarding the patriarchy can often feel like an attack. Acknowledgement of advantage can be hard and can often lead to feelings of guilt and anger, as well as sadness. We cannot help the advantage we may be born with in life, but once we are made aware of the advantages we hold, it is in our power to use that advantage to deconstruct the system that oppresses others. For people who are affected by misogyny, conversations regarding patriarchy can often feel heavy. Understanding that your experiences in life are often based around an identity you cannot control is very difficult and can make people feel hopeless, sad, or angry. These emotions can be felt and are normal for everyone, regardless of gender identity. Often the conversation around the patriarchy is framed as men versus women. This is entirely untrue. The spectrum of gender identity is much larger than simply man versus woman, and the patriarchy negatively affects all of us, regardless of the advantages it may provide to cisgender men. In order to understand the process of reconciliation, our understanding of the patriarchy being a binary system of oppression that only harms women and only helps men must change. As we have seen today, the patriarchy creates a culture that harms everyone. It is not men versus women. It is those who want to uphold the patriarchy versus those who want to tear it down. Reconciliation is the ongoing process of finding justice, forgiveness, and truth after harm or injustice has occurred, big or small. The process of reconciliation is not just used for specific issues between people. Reconciliation can also occur between people or groups that have had no specific interpersonal conflict but have been affected by the long term impacts of living in a society that has institutionalized oppression. The process of reconciliation and healing is incredibly hard for people, as the messages and experiences with rape culture have been inescapable our whole lives. This process is not linear and is different for everyone. As we find ourselves in the last block on a Friday, our emotions may run high and we may find ourselves exhausted from the last 3 yet emotional yet important and necessary days. We ask that people take a few minutes to reflect. It could be something that you learned or felt today or this week. Reflections are a great tool to be honest with yourself and honor any feelings or experiences that may come up for you. There are 3 prompts on the screen. Please feel free to respond to any of the 3 or feel free to write whatever comes to mind. Please pause the video while you do your journaling. The following are the pillars of reconciliation. The first is acknowledgement of the problem. Whether the issue is a specific interpersonal instance or a larger systemic problem, it needs to be acknowledged in full. Both people or groups need to acknowledge that harm has been caused. Both parties need to want to work together to solve it. A great way to start the process of reconciliation is using a call in. Let the people know that you care enough about the relationship that you want to work this out. 2. Next, both parties need to understand the problem that they are trying to reconcile. In our culture, we instill a fear of conflict and conversation. This discourages growth. We are often asked in conflicts, especially in social settings, school, and work, to apologize immediately or ignore the conflict and move on. This apology cannot be genuine if the person who caused harm does not understand why what they did or are currently doing is wrong or hurtful. Understanding the problem can look like having a conversation with the person you hurt until you understand. Another way to understand is by doing your own research. When an issue arises surrounding oppression, it is important that we all understand that the person being oppressed in that situation is not a guide or teacher to others about their oppression. This applies to all systems of oppression, not just gender. The internet can be a wonderful resource for learning about the history of systems of oppression while not putting the burden of teaching about it onto the oppressed. 3. Once you understand the problem, it's important to sincerely apologize to the person. 4. After an apology, it is important to explain how you intend to prevent this from happening, again, to the best of your ability. Often, action plans revolve around consistent education. For example, my plan to deconstruct the patriarchy within myself could be watching a TED Talk once a week, etc. Inform the person or people you impacted of this plan. Ask them if they would include anything else. 5. Fulfill this plan. Deconstructing internalized bias is a lifelong commitment. So is internalized reconciliation. Reconciliation, when done right, can reunite communities, groups, people, and even oneself. The group Bioneers has been impactful in creating global spaces for gender equity reconciliation work. This video talks about patriarchy and the binary, which we know is not how it operates.
We urgently need safe forums for men and women together to tell the untold stories. But this depth of truth and conversation is taboo in every major institution of society. Martin Luther King Jr. emphasized that injustice and corruption will never be transformed by keeping them hidden, but only by bringing them into the light and confronting them with the power of love. This is the core principle and purpose and method of our work called Gender Equity and Reconciliation. We create safe forums for women and men to have intimate and often taboo conversations around gender and sexuality.
Men cannot hear the deep truth of women's pain and remain the same men.
Women cannot hear the deep truth of men's pain and remain the same women. A theme we constantly hear in our work is that women are shocked to hear the level of men's suffering in the patriarchal system, a system that conditions boys and men to be tough, macho, not to cry or show emotion. Male-to-male violence is actually higher than male-to-female violence. Women are often surprised to hear this, and also that many men have been abused by women in their lives, their mothers, girlfriends, or partners.
Through the reconciliation process, countless men get to hear and deeply witness women's pain and the violation they experience at the hands of men. Women and men are able to express and connect to their pain, and men are able to realize how traditional patriarchal attitudes contribute to so much pain and suffering. A woman is raped every 33 seconds in South Africa. And that's just the reported cases. The gender equity and reconciliation work is really changing all of that by addressing the root causes of gender injustice and patriarchal cultural conditioning.
The men sat frozen in their chairs and many of the women wept. None had heard a rape story told in such a direct and shattering way. And one of the men said, "I don't know how to be a man anymore." And he was traumatized and he was shaking. We reflected back to the man, you don't know how to be a man anymore because you have taken the pain into your own heart, and now you are carrying part of that pain with you. And this is one of the keys of this work, that when we feel the pain of the other as our own pain, then there's a bridge across the hearts, and that transforms us.
As these realities are witnessed in a safe space, the real transformation and healing begins. Whatever I witness, whenever I witness, I can never be the same. And where I am witnessed, I can never go back. Gender reconciliation provides us a truly incredible space to reclaim our humanity as women and men.
We hope and pray that this may be the beginning of the true alchemical healing process. We have plenty of compost to work with.
We now ask you, what does reconciliation look like to you? Reconciliation is a very individual process. Although we have provided a common definition and understanding, the process of reconciliation means something different to everyone. So, what is the value of reconciliation? Often, when there is conflict, it is framed as clear, right, and wrong. One person's experiences must be wrong and another's must be right. Reconciliation may come through thoroughly understanding the person you wish to reconcile with, even if forgiveness is not the goal. Understanding someone's perspective and experience may be a way to bring about inner peace, even if you cannot forgive. The process of understanding another's pain and perspective oftentimes helps us find common ground. Finding common ground allows us to acknowledge our similarities, and simultaneously it gives us an opportunity to see our differences. Common ground centers people. It gives a platform of shared understanding and reminds us that it is not men versus everyone else. It is everyone who is unhappy with the system versus those who uphold it. As we have gone over in previous blocks, emotions, specifically for male-identifying people, are taboo. Making emotions taboo in society is a disservice to humanity. Emotional complexity is the very thing that makes us human. It is our birthright to be able to feel our emotions. Throughout history, showing emotions has been stigmatized. It's called overreaction. It's called overreacting, distracting, and weak. Imagine a world where you were allowed to be happy, angry, sad, stressed, or upset without being told it's a sign of weakness, an overreaction, or that you are taking up too much space. What would that new reality mean for you? The process and goals of reconciliation are specific to the individual. Normally, when we think of reconciling or dealing with conflict, it is the context of doing so with others, not with yourself. As we've talked about, as well as other systems of oppression have been subconsciously internalized. Whether see it or not, they affect the way we move in the world. Today may have made you think of an instance where you fed into or were affected by rape culture, toxic masculinity, sexual harassment, or assault, or perhaps something entirely different. Internal reconciliation is the process of coming to terms with your identities, your actions that may have hurt people or yourself, and the thought patterns that may feed into rape culture or other forms of oppression. These are just some examples of things someone could internally reconcile with. Internal reconciliation requires getting to know yourself. The process of getting to know yourself and understanding your internal biases is challenging. Here are a few things that could help in this process. Today wraps up a hard and informative week at BHS. As we leave to go to advisory and then to our weekend, please be mindful of how you feel and how others could be feeling in your classes as well. Listed here are just a few ways to take care of yourself. We will be providing a document linked to Canvas with resources on how to take care of yourself if you are a survivor of sexual misconduct, how to listen to others and help people who are survivors, along with many resources on reporting inside BHS or outside BHS with confidentiality. Look for the posters in the BHS restrooms or our resource document through our decision tree, which will walk you through your options for reporting if you identify as a survivor of sexual misconduct. It is in collectives that we find reservoirs of hope and optimism. Angela Davis. Here's our final ending reflection. Imagine a world where you were allowed to be angry, sad, happy, stressed, or upset without being told it's a sign of weakness, an overreaction, or that you are taking up too much space. What would that new reality mean for you? As always, during these reflections, the prompt is not set in stone. If you find yourself wanting to write about something else, please go ahead. Please pause the video while you do your journaling. Who is here to help? If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence and you wish to reach out to an anonymous support, contact Boston Area Rape Crisis Center, BARC, hotline by phone 24/7 at the number as follows. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at the number that follows. If you are struggling with other mental health challenges, the National Alliance on Mental Illness offers mental health education, resources, and a helpline at the number that follows. If you think a crime has been committed, contact Doreen Gallagher at Brookline Police at the following number. BHS social workers and guidance counselors are also here to help you. Please ask your advisory teacher if you are not aware of who your social worker or guidance counselor is. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.